The alarm goes off at 6:53, not 6:50 or 7. 6:53, which is a time I arrived at through iteration, the way you arrive at any system setting that works, by trying the others first and finding them wrong. 6:50 gives me too much morning, too much unstructured time before the day's requirements impose their shape, and the shape is what I need, the structure of obligation, the forward movement of having somewhere to be. 7 is too close. 7 doesn't leave enough buffer for the first task, which is not showering or coffee but the slower thing. The one with no name on a calendar. The one that takes as long as it takes. So 6:53. The alarm is a tone, not a song. Songs have associations, and I manage my associations carefully, which is one of the things I've learned to do in the way you learn to balance a budget or drive a manual transmission. Through necessity, through consequence, through enough repetition that the skill starts to feel like habit even when you know it isn't. I turn the alarm off before the second cycle. This is the first small task. It sounds like nothing. It is something. I lie still for approximately 2 minutes before getting up. This is not laziness and it is not depression, though I understand why those are the available categories, and I don't spend energy correcting people who assume one or the other. It is inventory, a brief daily assessment of what I'm working with, the same way a contractor checks the site before starting. The same way a pilot goes through the pre-flight list not because they expect to find something wrong, but because finding something wrong before takeoff is better than finding it after. I check sleep quality approximate, dreams if any and whether they left a residue. The body, tightness in the chest or shoulders, the particular stiffness that means I was clenched in the night. General orientation, which sounds dramatic but is just a word for the basic confirmation that I know where I am and what day it is and what the day requires. This morning sleep was adequate. 6 hours, broken once around 3 when I woke for no cause I could identify and lay in the dark for 20 minutes running the inventory early, which sometimes happens. No dreams I retained, shoulders tight, orientation intact. I get up, the bathroom first, then the kitchen, bathroom first. Coffee before anything that requires reading or decision-making, which is a rule I made and keep because decision fatigue is real, and early decisions cost more than later ones, and I am managing a resource that needs to last the full day. While the coffee brews, I stand at the counter and breathe. Not the formal kind, not a technique with a name, just slow and deliberate, in through the nose, out through the mouth, 4 or 5 times. I've been doing this since before it became something people recommended in articles. I do it because it works in the small mechanical sense, the way aspirin works, without requiring belief. The coffee maker finishes. I pour a cup. I drink it standing up because sitting down at this hour before the body has fully committed to being awake is a risk. The couch is visible from the kitchen, and the couch has a gravitational quality in the morning that I've learned to respect by not testing it.
Let's review the Q3 projection.
I drink the coffee.
Agreed.
I look at the window.
I suggest we
Outside, it's the particular early light of the season, not quite dark, not quite dawn. The sky the color of something undecided. I monitor the thought that arrives with this image, which is a thought about before, about a specific quality of early light I associate with a specific time that is now on the other side of the line I live on. I note the thought. I don't follow it. Following it is a choice, and I have a practice now of pausing at the entrance of certain corridors long enough to make the choice consciously, rather than drifting down them by default. I don't follow it. I finish the coffee. Shower, dressed, another cup. By 7:45, I'm at the kitchen table with my notebook. The notebook is not a journal in the way that word usually gets used. It doesn't contain feelings in the expressive sense. It contains a list. The day's requirements in order with an honest notation next to each of what they will cost. Not in dollar amounts. In the other currency, the one I've been budgeting since things changed. The one that doesn't have a formal name but that I track with the same attention I'd give any finite resource. Today's list, commute, moderate cost, manageable with headphones and a window seat if available. Risk factor, crowded train which requires a secondary plan, which is the bus which is slower but less enclosed. Work, morning. Low cost on low interaction days, higher if there are meetings. Today has one meeting, 11 o'clock, 6 people, conference room. I've pre-assessed the conference room, which sounds excessive and is necessary. It has windows. Exit is not obstructed. These are the relevant facts. Lunch. I bring my own, which is not frugality, it's logistics. Choosing food in real time from a menu in a loud place is a cost I've learned to eliminate on work days. I made the sandwich last night. Work, afternoon, variable. Afternoons are harder in a general way that I don't have a clean explanation for and have stopped needing one. I schedule the lighter tasks for afternoon when I have control over scheduling. Commute home. Higher cost than morning typically. The morning commute has the structure of purpose ahead of it. The evening commute has the apartment at the end of it, which is quiet and mine, and also the place where the monitoring relaxes slightly and relaxation costs something too. The transition itself, the shift between modes. Evening. Dinner, which I'll keep simple. An hour of something low demand. Bed by 10, 10:30 at the outside, because sleep is infrastructure, and I don't compromise infrastructure. I look at the list. It is a reasonable day. I've had harder days,
Okay,
many of them,
let's see
and I've
what we
completed them, which is
captured.
the data point I return to when a list looks like too much.
This action
Completion
item
rate.
is key.
Consistent. The work gets done. The day ends. The inventory in the morning finds me still here. There are things that aren't on the list because they don't schedule. The thought that arrives without warning in the middle of an ordinary task. The smell that belongs to a context I don't visit consciously, and that the body recognizes before the mind catches up. The moment in a conversation when something someone says sits wrong, not because they meant it wrong, but because it lands in a place that's still tender in the way that doesn't show on the outside. These are the unscheduled costs, the variable line in the budget. I can't eliminate them, so I maintain a margin for them, which means I don't fill the schedule to capacity, which means there are gaps in the day that look like inefficiency and are actually reserves. I learned this the hard way. The hard way was filling the schedule, running through the reserves, arriving at the end of a day with nothing and discovering that nothing has a quality to it that's difficult to describe and more difficult to recover from quickly. Now I leave the gaps. I guard the margin. It looks from the outside like I'm not doing much. From the inside, it looks like resource management. By 8:15, I'm ready to leave. Jacket, bag, keys, phone. I do this in order, same order, every morning, because order is a form of automation and automation preserves the resource. The keys go in the left pocket. Always the left pocket. I stopped finding this compulsive when I stopped having the energy to find anything compulsive. I stand at the door for a moment. This is the last pause before the day engages, before the world outside the apartment requires things from me that the apartment doesn't. I do a final check. Inventory status, approximate plan, known risks, contingencies for the known risks, status, functional. Tired in the baseline way I'm always tired now. The tiredness that sleep addresses partially, and that living with this much attention costs continuously. The tiredness that was new once and is now just the climate. I've been awake for approximately 80 minutes. I've monitored 4 thoughts that required redirecting, made 3 rule-based decisions that removed the need for real-time choice, assessed 1 risk and prepared 1 contingency, consumed 2 cups of coffee, completed the list. The day hasn't started yet. I open the door. I am already tired. The train is crowded. I take the window seat in the 3rd car, which I prefer for documented reasons. The window gives the eyes somewhere to go that isn't another person's face, and the 3rd car is typically less full than the first 2, which fill from the main staircase on the platform. I've mapped this the way you map anything you move through daily, not obsessively, practically. I put in 1 earbud, not 2. 2 cuts too much and I need peripheral awareness. 1 gives me enough signal to manage the ambient noise without isolating completely. The audio is something without lyrics, instrumental, a texture rather than a thing to follow. I've learned the distinction between distraction and regulation, and this is regulation. something to occupy the part of the brain that would otherwise scan the environment continuously for input it doesn't need. I look at the window. The tunnel wall moves past. I breathe at the pace I set in the kitchen and maintain it, and by the third stop I've settled into the commute, rather than riding it like a surface I might slide off. This is a small win. I note it and move on, because dwelling on small wins costs almost as much as having them. The office building requires a badge tap, a lobby crossing, an elevator decision. The elevator decision, whether to wait for one that's empty or near empty, or whether to take the next available regardless of occupancy. The decision depends on the status I determined in the morning inventory. Today, functional, margin adequate, elevator manageable. I take the next available, which holds 4 other people. I stand near the back, face forward, watch the numbers. 12th floor. The doors open. I get out and walk to my desk. The same route. Because routes are decisions I've already made and spent nothing on this morning. My desk is where I left it, which sounds self-evident and is daily, a mild, specific comfort. The plant. The 2 cards which I've moved to the corner. The succulent someone left which I've named internally but not out loud. I hang up my jacket and sit down, and the chair takes my weight, and I open my laptop and the screen comes on and I begin the external layer of the day. Email first, this is policy. I read an order and flag what requires response and respond to 3 things that are simple, and flag 2 things that require thought, and leave thought for later, when the 11 o'clock meeting has been paid for, and I know what's left in the account. While I do this, the internal layer runs parallel. Someone walks behind me and I track the footstep, register and release, which takes a fraction of a second and costs a fraction of something.
I suggest we adjust.
Marcus says good morning from across the room and I say good morning back, tone calibrated, volume appropriate, and resume reading the email. Priya's phone rings and she answers it, and her voice is a background event that I file as non-relevant, and the filing takes a fraction of a second. This is the dual running. The external layer, email, professional, functional. The internal layer, intake, assess, classify, release. Intake, assess, classify, release. A loop that runs beneath everything, that has been running since before I was fully aware it was running, that I am now aware of the way you become aware of your own heartbeat once someone mentions it. The difference is that the heartbeat runs itself. This doesn't. The 11 o'clock meeting. Conference room B, which has windows on the north side and an exit that is not obstructed, and which holds 12 people with 6 in attendance today, which means space between chairs, which I'd noted as a favorable variable when I read the calendar last night. I arrived 2 minutes early, which is a practice. 2 minutes early means I choose my seat rather than taking what's available, and the seat I choose is the one with the wall behind it and the door visible, which is not dramatic, which is just where I sit. People arrive. The meeting begins. I have a role in this meeting, 2 agenda items that are mine, and I perform them with the accuracy and completeness that I've always performed my work, because work performance is not the thing that slipped when things changed. The brain that manages the work is functional. Often in meetings, it's the most functional it is all day, because meetings have rules and structure and a defined endpoint, and defined endpoints are easier to move toward than open-ended time. I present my items. I answer questions. I ask 2 of my own. I note that the person across from me is speaking faster than usual, and that this is not my information to manage. I note that the fluorescent light in the corner is flickering, and I sit at an angle that removes it from my direct sight line, which takes 3 seconds. The meeting runs to 45 minutes. We conclude. People gather their things. A brief cluster near the door, conversation migrating outward, and I take a moment to review my notes, which is genuine and also gives the cluster time to disperse before I join the exit. I walk back to my desk. Post-meeting assessment, interior. Cost was moderate, within projected parameters, margin intact. Slight shoulder tension, new since the flickering light, will resolve with movement. I get up and walk to the kitchen and pour a glass of water and drink it standing at the counter and look out the window at the building across the way, and the tension resolves.
Okay, let's
As
see
projected.
what we captured.
I go back to my desk.
This
Lunch is the
action
sandwich I
item
made last
is
night.
key.
Turkey, mustard, the specific bread I buy because the texture doesn't bother me, which is a criterion that sounds strange until you understand that management includes sensory management, and sensory management includes food texture, which is minor, and which I accommodate because minor accommodations prevent moderate expenditures. I eat at my desk. This is permitted, and I permit it to myself without apology. The alternative is the break room, which has variable occupancy and acoustic properties that make it higher cost than the desk on most days, and today I'm midday and managing the margin toward the afternoon. Priya stops by while I'm eating. She asks about the Henderson file. I answer the Henderson file questions. She leaves. The exchange is professional and adequate, and costs what brief professional exchanges cost, which is less than social exchanges because professional exchanges have a subject and a conclusion, and the conclusion is visible from the beginning. Social exchanges cost more because they're open-ended. The open-endedness requires monitoring the exit. Monitoring the exit requires a thread of attention running underneath the conversation, watching for the natural conclusion, preparing the language that will close it without abruptness, because abruptness registers as wrong, and registered wrong requires brief explanation, which is an unscheduled cost. I've become efficient at social exits. I'm not proud of the efficiency or ashamed of it. It's a skill the job requires. The afternoon. The afternoon is what it usually is, which is to say it's the part of the day where the maintenance becomes more visible to me internally, even when it's invisible externally. The morning has a tautness to it, a readiness that the evening doesn't. By 2 o'clock, something has softened in the system, not collapsed, just the difference between a muscle contracted and a muscle at rest, and the resting muscle is more aware of its own effort. I work. The work is real, and I'm good at it, and I do it. Between tasks, in the spaces that look like pauses, I run checks. Thought inventory. One thought arrived during the afternoon that belongs to the category I don't follow. It came in through a phrase someone used in an email, a phrase that landed in the wrong place. I noted it, assessed the cost of pursuing it versus redirecting. Redirected. The redirecting took the rest of that paragraph to complete, and then it was done, and the email continued. This is what the interior of the afternoon looks like. Not dramatic, not visible, just the ongoing work of a person maintaining themselves in real time, in public, while also doing their job, which is a second job, running parallel, unremarked, uncompensated, without performance review. At 4:15, I go back to the kitchen for more water. The kitchen is empty. I stand at the window again, the same window as noon, the same building across the way. The light is different now, lower, the day moving toward its conclusion. I stand there and drink the water and let the internal layer slow for a moment, just a moment, the way you ease pressure on a held breath. Someone once asked me, with genuine curiosity, how I was managing so well. They meant it as a compliment, and I received it as one, and said what the situation called for. What I didn't say is that managing well and doing well are different columns in the ledger. That the management is a full-time undertaking that produces, as its primary output, the appearance of doing well. That I am, in this sense, very good at my job. That I have never missed a deadline, never failed to deliver, never let the internal layer break through the external layer in any way that required explanation. That this consistent performance is not evidence that the job is getting easier. It is evidence that I've gotten better at the job, which is not the same thing. Which will not eventually become the same thing. This is what I've learned that nobody told me in the beginning, when people said things like it gets easier with the confidence of people who hadn't worked this particular job. It doesn't get easier. You get more skilled. You learn the building. You find the good seats on the train, and you map the conference rooms, and you stock the margin, and you keep the records, and you complete the days. And then you come back the next morning and open the notebook and write the list. Not recovery. Maintenance. The building doesn't stop needing it. You don't stop doing it. You just get faster. The commute home costs more than the morning one. I'd noted this in the list, and the notation was accurate as it usually is, which doesn't make it easier, only expected. The train is fuller in the evening, the body's pressing the available space into something smaller, and the smaller space requires more from the system that monitors space. I stand near the door with my bag in front of me and look at the middle distance between other people's shoulders and breathe at the pace I set this morning in the kitchen, which still works, which I'm grateful for in the specific flat way I'm grateful for things that work.
Let's review the
3
Q3
stops.
projections.
4.
Agreed.
The car empties incrementally, and by the 6th stop I have room, and by the 8th I have a seat, and I take it and put my head back against the window and close my eyes for the last 4 minutes of the ride, which is not sleep and is not rest exactly, but is a reduction in input, a brief narrowing of the field, and the narrowing costs nothing and returns a small amount, which is a good exchange rate. I take it when I can get it. The apartment receives me the way it always does. Quiet, specifically mine, the particular arrangement of things that nobody has disturbed. I hang up my jacket. I put my bag in its place. I change out of work clothes into the clothes that are not work clothes, which is a transition I perform deliberately, because the transition signals something to the system, a shift in the requirements, and the system responds to signals if I give them consistently. I've been giving them consistently for a while now. I make dinner. Tonight it's the simple thing, eggs and toast, because the margin by evening is what it is, and cooking that requires sustained attention is an evening cost I eliminate when I can. I eat at the table without the television, which is a choice I revisit daily and make the same way each time. The television in the evening introduces content I can't fully pre-screen, and unscreened content is a variable cost, and by evening, I'm managing the variable line carefully. I eat. The apartment is quiet. Outside I can hear the street, a distant ambulance moving through the city going somewhere that isn't here, and I track the sound until it fades, and then I release it. The release takes a moment longer than it would have before. Most things take a moment longer than they would have before. The dishes, the counter wiped down, the leftovers, of which there are none because I cooked the right amount, another practice, another small elimination of unnecessary decision. By 8 o'clock, the external day is complete. Everything the list required has been delivered. I sit on the couch with a cup of tea I'll drink half of and look at the room, which is the room unchanged, doing nothing that requires anything from me. This is the part of the day that should be easiest. It is not the easiest part. During the day, the external requirements provide a structure that the internal work slots into. The meeting at 11, the Henderson file, the commute with its defined duration and endpoint. These things give the internal layer something to run alongside, a parallel track, and the parallel track helps. The work of staying stable is easier when there's something to stay stable for, something immediate and practical and real. The evening removes the parallel track. What's left is just the internal layer, running, with nothing alongside it. I've explained this to Dr. Okafor in various ways across various sessions, and she understands it in the clinical register, which is useful, and she's offered frameworks that I use, which are also useful, and none of it makes the evenings shorter. What happens in the evenings is not dramatic. I want to be precise about this because precision matters to me, and because the dramatic version is the one people expect, and the imprecise version does a disservice to what it actually is. What it actually is. The monitoring continues without the distraction of external content to monitor. The loop, intake, assess, classify, release, runs without incoming material, so it turns inward, and what it finds inward is what's always there, the knowledge of what happened. Not the images of it, but the fact of it, the way you know a room is behind a closed door without seeing inside. The knowledge sits there. The system monitors it. The monitoring is vigilance without object. Effort without target. The body stays ready for something that isn't coming. This is the best description I have. The body stays ready. The shoulders don't fully release. The jaw holds a tension that I find when I check and release deliberately, and that returns by the time I've stopped checking. The breath, if I stop managing it, shortens slightly. Not to the point of distress, just to a register slightly above baseline. I bring it back. It shortens again. I bring it back. This is the evening shift. I tried the television for a period, the early weeks before I'd fully understood the cost structure. The television provided content, and content gave the monitoring loop something external to process, which helped, but the content was unscreened and occasionally something arrived in it that landed in the wrong place, and the cost of that landing exceeded what the distraction had provided. I switched to reading, which I can pre-screen more effectively. I know which books are safe and which approach territory that costs, and I've organized my reading accordingly. This is not avoidance in the way people use that word as a synonym for unhealthy. It is resource allocation. There will be time, eventually, for the books that cost more. That time is not the evening when the margin is what it is. Tonight I read for 40 minutes. The book is safe and the 40 minutes returns something, a genuine absorption, the external layer briefly active again in a low-cost way. At 9:15 I put the book down, and the loop resumes its inward turn. Bed at 10, as scheduled. I go through the pre-sleep routine, which is a routine in the operative sense, a sequence of small actions designed to signal to the system that the requirements are ending, and the vigilance can reduce. The reduction doesn't happen completely. I've accepted that it doesn't happen completely, but it reduces, and the reduction is enough to make sleep available. Usually, if I approach it correctly. Tonight I approach it correctly. I lie in the dark and breathe, and the ceiling is the ceiling, and the building settles, and outside the city continues its continuity. And I am in the bed, and the bed is familiar, and nothing in the room requires anything. The system scans anyway. I let it scan. Resistance costs more than allowance. I've learned this. Fighting the vigilance feeds it, and feeding it extends the evening, and extending the evening reduces the sleep. And reduced sleep means a harder morning inventory, which means a harder day, which means a harder evening. The ledger compounds. I've seen it compound, and I don't let it compound if I can help it. So I lie in the dark and let the system scan and watch it from a slight distance the way you watch weather through a window. It's happening. You're inside. The window is between you and it. Some nights the window holds better than others. Tonight it holds adequately. I wake once. 3:27 by the clock, which I keep across the room so that checking it requires sitting up, which introduces enough friction to prevent the check from becoming a loop. I checked the time when I was a light sleeper before, and it became a loop, and the loop became its own cost. Now, one check, deliberate, friction-gated. 3:27. The room, the ceiling. The sound of the building. Nothing has happened that requires response. I run the inventory, status, orientation, immediate threat assessment, which returns nothing, which is the correct return, which the system does not fully accept, but which I accept on its behalf. I breathe. I wait. The 20 minutes that waiting usually takes in the middle of the night takes 23 minutes tonight, which is within normal variation. I go back to sleep. The alarm at 6:53 finds me already partially awake, which is usual. The last hour before the alarm is lighter, the system anticipating the day, beginning its readiness before readiness is required. I reach over and turn it off before the second cycle. First task, complete. I lie still for the inventory.
Let's review
Sleep,
the Q3
adequate. Broken once.
projections.
Recovery time 23 minutes, within range.
Adjust the timeline.
Shoulders,
That works. Let's
tighter than
discuss
yesterday,
the
which means
details.
yesterday cost more than the morning assessment suggested, which means I'll adjust today's schedule slightly, drop one optional item in the afternoon, guard the margin more actively. Body, awake. Ready, in the specific way the body is always ready now, the readiness that doesn't fully stop, that I've been told by Dr. Okafor is a response is a thing the body learned for reasons that made sense at the time, and that it hasn't unlearned yet and may not fully unlearn. May not. She didn't say won't. I noted the distinction and filed it and take it out occasionally and look at it and put it back. I get up. The coffee maker starts. The morning begins again. The same beginning, the same sequence, the same careful allocation of the same finite resource toward the same long list of requirements. I stand in the kitchen and breathe. There were no days off last week. There have been no days off since this began. I have checked the terms of the employment repeatedly from different angles, hoping to find a clause I missed, a provision for leave, a weekend rate, an accrual of rest that pays out at some point in a block of unmonitored time. The terms don't contain it. There is no clause. The job runs 7 days. It runs on holidays. It ran on my birthday in October, and it will run on the next one. It ran the night of Reyes's party, and it ran while Gil made his toast, and it ran through all 23 signatures on the cream envelope, and it is running now, at 6:54 in the morning, while I wait for the coffee. I knew this, in some form. I've known it for a while. Knowing it, and arriving at it fresh each morning are different kinds of knowing. I pour the coffee. I open the notebook. I write the list. December comes in without announcement. One morning it's November, and the next the calendar says otherwise, and the change means nothing in terms of the job, which doesn't observe the calendar. The days get shorter. The light at 6:53 is different from the light at 6:53 in October. Darker, the window showing nothing but the reflection of the room back at itself. I've adjusted the lamp placement to compensate, moved it closer to the kitchen table, which helps with the mornings in a small practical way. Small practical adjustments. This is most of what December has required so far. I've been doing this for long enough now that I've stopped counting in weeks. For a while I counted, not compulsively, just as a reference point, a way of measuring distance from the before time, as if distance itself were progress. Week 6, week 11, week 15. I told Dr. Okafor the week number at the start of each session, which she received without comment, which I have since interpreted as her allowing me the counting without endorsing it as a metric. She was right not to endorse it. Week number turned out to be a bad metric because it implied trajectory, a movement toward something. And what I've learned is that the movement isn't toward something. It's lateral. It's the accumulation of managed days, each one roughly equivalent to the one before, the graph line not ascending but continuing, which is different. Continuing is not nothing. I want to be clear. It's the primary output of the job, and it has value. I just stopped expecting it to look like recovery, which is a word that implies a destination, a restoration of a prior state, and the prior state is not available. The prior state was before, and before is the other side of the line, and the line doesn't move. So I stopped counting weeks. Now I count smaller. Today's list, this morning's inventory, the current margin, and what the current day requires of it. It's a better metric. Less information, more accuracy. The job has levels I've mapped over time. Level 1 is baseline. The system is running, the monitoring is active, the costs are predictable and within the margin. Most days are level 1. Work functions, conversations complete, the commute gets done. From the outside, this looks indistinguishable from how anyone lives. This is by design and also just true. Level 1 is a functional life, unremarkable, ordinary. Level 2 is elevated. Something has introduced a variable cost that exceeded the estimate. A conversation that went to an unscheduled place. A sound that arrived in the wrong context. A night where the window didn't hold as well and the inventory in the morning showed the deficit. Level 2 requires redistribution, dropping optional items, increasing the margin allocation, moving slower through the day's requirements. I have level 2 days with some regularity. They are manageable. Level 3 I've had twice. Level 3 is when the redistribution isn't enough, and the day becomes primarily about completion rather than function. Getting to the end of it with the systems intact. I don't work well on level 3 days. I do enough to satisfy the external requirements, and I cancel what can be canceled, and I eat whatever is simplest, and I go to bed early, and in the morning I run the inventory and it's usually closer to 2, sometimes back to 1. There is no level 4 in the system I've built. This is deliberate. Level 4 would be what happens if I let level 3 continue without response, and I respond before it continues, which is the purpose of the daily inventory, the weekly check-in with Dr. Okafor, the margin I guard. Prevention is cheaper than recovery, and recovery is not always possible, and I've learned to spend on prevention without resentment because the alternative is something I don't catalog. People at work have stopped referencing it. This took time. There was a period, the early weeks, when I could feel the awareness of it in conversations, a slight adjustment in how people approached me, a care in word choice that I noticed the way you notice someone walking around something on the floor. That period has mostly passed. Now I'm just a person at the desk with the plant and the succulent and the 2 cards in the corner that I should probably take down and haven't. The cards being there is a choice I make by not making it, which is its own kind of choice. I'm aware of this. Marcus gave me a hard time about the Hendricks account last week, which is normal, which is how Marcus has always operated, and receiving it normally cost less than receiving it carefully would have, which is information about where I am currently. When the people around you can treat you normally, the job gets quieter for that duration. I appreciate Marcus for this without telling him I appreciate him for it, because explaining the appreciation would require explaining the job, and the job is not something I've explained to anyone at work. Priya asked if I wanted to join the team for drinks on Friday. I said yes. I went. I had 1 drink and stayed 90 minutes, and the 90 minutes cost what I'd budgeted for them, and I came home and ate the simple dinner, and the system ran its evening routine, and I went to sleep. This is what participation looks like now. Pre-budgeted, time-bounded, followed by recovery protocols. It is not how participation used to look, which was unconsidered, which was just showing up and staying until it seemed like time to leave. I miss unconsidered participation the way you miss a car you used to drive that didn't require anything special. You got in, you went somewhere, you got out. It didn't occur to you to be grateful for the simplicity because the simplicity was just how driving worked. Now I notice the cost of every trip. Dr. Okafor asked last Thursday what I was hoping for, not expecting, hoping. I sat with the question for longer than I usually sit with her questions, which are generally things I've prepared for in some form. This one arrived clean, without a slot to put it in. I said, I'm hoping for more level 1 days.
Q3 projection.
She said, what would more level 1 days look like? I said, similar to now, just cheaper. She wrote something. Then she said, is cheaper the same as better? I said I thought it might be as close to better as the job allows. She accepted this. We talked about margin management for a while, and she made 2 suggestions I wrote down and have since implemented with moderate results, which is the return rate I've come to expect from implementation. Moderate results, incremental adjustments. The line continuing. Sunday afternoons are the hardest. I've noted this pattern and I haven't solved it, and I've stopped expecting to solve it. Sunday afternoons are the part of the week where the structure is most absent. The work requirements don't begin until tomorrow. The weekend social obligations have usually completed by midday, and what remains is several hours of unscheduled time with no external parallel track. I fill them. I've built a Sunday afternoon structure, a walk of fixed duration, a grocery run that provides decision-based activity, a call with my sister, something for dinner that takes longer to make than weeknight meals, a film in the evening from a pre-screened list. The structure works. Most Sundays it works. I move through the structure and reach the evening, and the evening transitions into the sleep routine, and the sleep is adequate, and Monday morning the inventory finds me at level 1. What the structure costs is the absence of spontaneity, which is another way of saying the absence of a kind of freedom I had before, the freedom of an afternoon that could go anywhere, because anywhere was not a budget item. I don't spend much time on this absence. It's in the ledger and I've noted it, and dwelling on it is an expenditure with no return. This morning, 6:53, the alarm in the dark, the lamp on the kitchen table casting its December light, the coffee maker doing its counted beeps. I stand at the counter with the notebook open and I write the list. Commute. Work. Morning. Meeting at 2, small, 4 people, a room I know. Lunch, which I've already made. Work, afternoon, commute home. Dinner, the pasta. An hour of low demand, bed by 10. Margin allocation, standard, with a small reserve held back because there's a variable in the afternoon I can't fully pre-assess. A conversation that may go to an unscheduled place and may not, and I want the reserve if it does. I review the list. Reasonable, achievable, within the parameters of a level 1 day if nothing introduces significant variance. I close the notebook. I drink the rest of my coffee standing at the counter, looking at the dark window that shows me the room reflected back. The lamp,
Okay, let's
the
see
counter,
what we captured.
a person holding a cup. Somewhere behind the reflection
This action
outside,
item is
the city is
key.
doing what it does, moving through its own requirements, indifferent in the way cities are indifferent, which I don't take personally, and which some mornings is a comfort. The sheer scale of the indifference, the way it makes the job feel small by comparison even when it isn't. I put the cup in the sink. I get my jacket, my bag, my keys in the left pocket. I check the status. Functional. Tired in the baseline way. Margin adequate. Plan in place. I open the door. The job begins again. Not for the last time. Not with any indication of when the last time will be. Just again. The same clocking in. The same long shift.